Alright, today we're going to talk about a rather intriguing mystery in White Orchard that may never be fully understood. This is because it was not fully developed and is likely part of the many pieces of content that were cut prior to the release of The Witcher 3. Very little of it can be accessed by playing the game normally, but with the use of free camera and mods that allow us to ignore the borders of the world, we can actually see a fair amount more. For a lot of what I'm about to show you here, I have to thank a viewer of mine by the name of Doboshing, and by extension a number of Polish Witcher fans and content creators who have been looking into these vestigial details, and I do hope I can contribute with a couple of interesting theories myself. So, most of what we are looking at takes place during winter in White Orchard, you know, in the ending where Ciri becomes an Empress, and it is all centered around the places of power. There are many of them in White Orchard, all of which remain active up until and including the Witcher-S ending, but during the Empress ending, which chronologically takes place later, all of the places of power are now either missing or are replaced by something else. The first and only curious detail that can be seen by default while playing normally is down here. There is an altar that is normally infested by ghouls, which you can clear and allow the common people access to it. Not far behind, inside the forest, there is a place of power. Except in the Empress ending, it looks different, inactive for some reason, and what's more, there are these floating, rotating stones all around it. They light up as though they are interactable when you use your Witcher senses, but I didn't find a way to actually interact with them. I tried using signs and items and whatnot, all of it to no avail. Now those floating stones actually extend and form a kind of path you can follow from the altar to the inactive place of power. So by the looks of it, I would assume that this was part of a quest or event where you had to look for something and you would stumble upon these floating stones, which you would then have to follow with your Witcher senses and arrive at this location. Another thought I had is that these stones are a placeholder for something. Maybe there was supposed to be something else in their place and it was never finished, never properly implemented. And speaking of placeholders, we move on to the next mysterious bit, which is an actual placeholder. There is this large red doodad located in the crypt of White Orchard. There's a curious story here about the Witcher from the School of the Viper who was falsely accused and murdered by the locals while trying to cleanse the crypt, and you can visit it and learn all about that during the intro of the game, except in the Empress ending there was supposed to be something else here, and it clearly was not fully implemented. The best way to get here is with a mod that unlocks your camera, because the built-in NVIDIA Ansel has what's it called? Collision. You cannot go through objects with it, and the door is closed. There is also a world border preventing you from reaching the place, and even if you can circumvent it somehow, you will still fall through the ground before you are physically capable of reaching the chapel. But regardless, there was supposed to be something here, and I've no idea what it could have been. Oh, and you might be wondering how any of this relates to the places of power. Well, right in front of the chapel, there normally is a place of power. It is there in the Witcher ending as well, but in the Empress ending, the place of power is gone, and deeper inside, the big red thing shows up instead. Perhaps it was supposed to be the remains of the monolith that we used to channel from? I don't know. What I do know is that if we continue further north, beyond the chapel, we can reach the location of the next place of power, which in the Empress ending once again is gone. And instead, the surrounding area has several of these large nests. They are filled with human bones, and initially I thought it was another griffin infestation. However, the fact that there are multiple nests nearby probably makes harpies a more likely suspect. Sadly, we don't get to see any flying creatures around, but what we can see, however, when we fly around with our camera, are these enormous objects. Seems like a graphical glitch of sorts. They only appear at the right distance and at the right camera angle. But what's curious about them is that they begin from the back of the chapel. And if you look underground, they begin specifically from the location of that missing red thing we saw before. And they extend all the way to the harpy nests. So in some way, they definitely have to be related to all of this incomplete, unfinished content. Tell me if you can make some sense out of it. And for the end, I saved arguably the most interesting bit. It is located at the Place of Power, next to which you meet the dwarves from the Isle of Mists in the other ending. Luckily, it's close enough to where you can physically go without falling through the world, but it is still beyond the invisible borders, and so you do need a mod that allows you to cross these borders without forcefully being teleported. I'm using this one, coincidentally published by the same person who published the Brothers in Arms mod, and if you go there, you'll see that the Place of Power is once again gone, and instead there is this bloody altar or sacrificial stone, where by all likelihood human sacrifices take place. And next to it there is a curious note. It mentions a person called the Prophet, a disease sent by demons, and attempts to appease and even worship these demons. There's also part 2 of these notes in a small camp to the west, also in normally inaccessible territory, next to a cage with a couple of murdered people inside. So the question is, what is this all about? Well, my best attempt at figuring it out is that this was once part of the conclusion to the rather sizable quest in Velen, which was cut from the game. I talked about it a long time ago in this video, but basically it's the original story of the Devil's Pit. You probably know that the place was completely unused when the game came out, but there was supposed to be a renegade Nilfgaardian general or something who was dabbling with the Catriona plague as well as demonology. And both of these seem to be mentioned in the notes. The video I showed also contains a tour of the Devil's Pit, the way it was before, and it had a lot of gruesome stuff, like torture chambers and piles of dead bodies, as well as weird occult objects and even a freaking Stargate or whatever that was. It's a bit of a shame that all of it is now lost in the next gen edition, replaced by the new quest they made for the Devil's Pit, but I theorize that the aftermath of the original quest chain extended into the Empress ending. Keep in mind that the man behind it was supposed to be Nilfgaardian, and this ending, is the only one where Nilfgaard always wins. So perhaps under certain circumstances, he would grow to be seen as a prophet of the demons, and his cult would eventually reach these parts. In fact, if we go deeper into the rabbit hole, you could theorize that there were already signs of occult activity. You know, that house behind the notice board? It has a rather creepy section inside. It actually gets burned down if Redania and the Witch Hunters win during the Witcheress ending.
This is how all traitors will end. We'll burn the rebellion seed to the ground. You can watch from afar.
I tried deciphering some of the writings, but it's quite a pain to do so, because the letters blend with the texture of the wood, and they're also written in a manner that's just hard to read. Now, I think I did manage to decipher one phrase, which is actually seen several times in the room, and it says, either fuck daddy or fuck Raddy. Initially, I identified the first letter as a weirdly shaped D, but given that Raddy possibly refers to Radovid, it's most likely a weirdly shaped R instead. What's more curious is that there is a word that I don't think is seen anywhere else here, and it says Salma, which is the succubus from Novigrad. Now, I don't know if these were all supposed to be connected, or if it's just random gibberish, like there are also a couple of swallows at the bottom of the wall here, but it's curious nevertheless. Another thing that may have crossed your mind, but is probably not the answer, is that this prophet refers to the person who does the intro of The Witcher 3.
Your kings have failed you, so now you turn to the gods, and yet you do not plead?
He can definitely be seen as a prophet, but he actually advocates for the gods. He suggests that the hardships we face are their punishment for us not taking matters into our own hands and instead turning to witchers and magic and whatnot. So I still think that the events of the original Devil's Pit make more sense together with what we see in the Empress ending. And as for the places of power and why they have mysteriously disappeared, well, perhaps the dwarves from the Isle of Mists stole them? I mean, it's a funny thing to consider, but if we wait some time around them, in the other ending, we can see that they actually move to the place of power, where we find part 1 of the cultist notes, and they literally start digging it out. So perhaps they succeeded? And ultimately, even with the magical rocks gone, the places of power will always draw people to them, even if they're not sure why. That is, of course, what Avalach teaches us.
You build upon the ruins of hallowed places, upon intersections of the power, and then you forget why. The ancient magic of these sites persists regardless.
And with that, I believe I'm done for now. Let me know how you feel about all this, and if you know anything more, and this goes mostly towards my Polish viewers, don't hesitate to share it in the comments. Alright, thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my supporters and YouTube members, and until the next video, stay tuned and be good.